Hey guys, welcome to the Mogul Marathon Real Estate Podcast. I'm your host, Yannik Cudjoe-Virgil, and I'm super excited for our guest today. Our guest today is Ahmed Serafi. He is a real estate developer and has experience leading all facets of real estate development, spanning more than 100 million in commercial assets, both multifamily and commercial real estate. He started off in commercial real estate brokerage and general contracting and now runs his own development firm. Ahmed, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Yannick, man. Happy to be here.
Absolutely. So, Ahmed and I, just a quick backstory, we met on Clubhouse, and, I've always thought to myself, this guy has so much knowledge and experience in the real estate sector, and you would never know because he's such like a humble guy. And, it's truly an honor getting to know more about you, Ahmed. And, we've had long conversations on Clubhouse back when Clubhouse was just a 24-hour marathon, right? People were just on there just for days. But, just listening to you and your background in real estate development and, your experience has been nothing but, a wealth of knowledge. So super excited to have you on the show.
Well, excited to be here. And then it was back when Clubhouse had everyone's attention because we were all on COVID lockdown and we couldn't do anything. We had to stay home all day.
Absolutely. It was nothing but time back then, but I think a lot of people just figured out, hey, I actually have a business to run. So right. That's certainly what I felt like. But for our listeners today who are really interested in getting into real estate development, but let's start with let's talk about Ahmed. Tell us more about your story, how you got to where you are today, from starting off in brokerage, or even just as a young kid, growing up and getting to where you are today.
Right. Fairly simple, but grew up here in Southern California, where I'm still based, outside of Los Angeles, and grew up, middle class, nothing spectacular, nothing too gritty. But I did have to work my whole life. My dad, being an immigrant, made his kids work. So my dad, like every Arab immigrant, had a gas station, and I spent pretty much half my life there. That's why it took me 8 years to go to college, because I was working 60 to 70 hours a week in the gas station, from opening it up at 6 a.m. to closing it down at midnight on many days. So grew up really hands-on, stocking shelves, fixing gas pumps, always doing things myself, because that's what we're taught. And I always liked putting things together. I always liked playing with Legos. I always liked fixing gas pumps. I always enjoyed taking, my car apart and putting it back together and things like that. So I always grew up very hands-on, and I just enjoyed the whole process of building things and putting things back together. So I think that really helped influenced me on my journey to going into commercial real estate and then into construction and development, where I am now. So 8 years in college, left college, was able to get a job as a commercial real estate broker here in Southern California for a company that is now known as CB, a very large commercial firm, and doing a lot of real estate transactions here. And, just finding my superpower, finding what I was really good at. And that was being able to find opportunities that most people don't see, is able to spot an opportunity or a need that most people don't see, whether it's a piece of land or a piece of dirt, or it's a customer or client who is needing help, but they don't even know what they need help with. So it's able to find those opportunities and start putting them together. And did commercial real estate brokerage for many years, and rolled into commercial development, project management, company management, things like that, working on large projects such as high schools, colleges, universities, culinary buildings, office buildings, performing arts centers, all sorts of projects that I was leading construction teams on, because I had a natural knack of just putting things together, whether it was teams of guys or materials or projects. I was just really good at putting things together, and I really enjoyed it. And over the years, took all that experience and deal making and rolled it into a investment and development firm that I have now, that I've been putting a lot of time and effort into growing now. And we have property from Southern California throughout Phoenix and all the way out to Dallas, Texas, where I got a couple projects going on right now and looking for more.
Oh, that's amazing, and that's an extensive amount of experience, that you
Yeah.
were able to take into your real estate development business. Talk about why did you get into real estate specifically? What made you get into real estate, specifically real estate development?
Uh, I don't know if I really fell into it or if it's something that drew me, but when I was getting ready to finish college, one of my professors was a president of a large real estate investment development firm here in California. And having a conversation with him saying I need to go into find a job and find a career. And he suggested, hey, look into commercial real estate brokerage. I have friends. I think you'd be good there. And that just happened. And I went through the process and got a job as a commercial real estate broker, spent many years brokering industrial and office property, and really enjoyed it, really found a knack that I was good at it, really enjoyed the sales process, really enjoyed the client building process, because some of these commercial deals are not like residential. Residential, you find somebody, they look 30, 60, 90 days, find the house, go into escrow, and start to finish, maybe in a few months, you found a client and you close the deal. Some of my commercial clients, I would spend years and years developing a relationship with them. When it was finally time for them to expand or to relocate or to have a new facility, it takes years and time. And I guess I've enjoyed that process of building relationships, building connections, building opportunities, and then at the end of the day, building the deal and building the development as well. So I just really found a knack in real estate and taking my love for building, not just projects or buildings, but building relationships and friendships and opportunities and groups, and just was able to capitalize on that, because putting things together, building better is something that I enjoy, and it's taken to me to where I am now.
No, that's great. That's great. I would say for me, I think we share somewhat of a similarity in how we got into real estate. For me, it was starting off at brokerage, similar what you did, doing representing clients, right, and then taking that experience and then moving that into the asset management space, and then taking that and started doing deals and then went off full time. So I think there's a lot of value in working for someone else, right? Being able to learn from someone else at a high level, watching their mistakes and taking the things that they've done well and implementing it into your own business. Was that kind of like the mindset that you had to when growing your own real estate development firm?
I've figured out, early on that, like I said, putting things together and building things were something that I really enjoyed, which were, building a friendship, building a development deal, building a group, building a company. I really enjoyed that whole process of taking nothing and assembling all the pieces and putting it together and having something at the very end, whether I'm building a dinner where I'm taking all the raw ingredients and putting it together, and at the end of the day I got a dinner, or it's a friendship and building a friendship and you have a great friendship, or it's a project. So by doing that, you also get to see how other people do it wrong, right? You also see how people skip steps. You also get to see how people go cheap, and they go cheap on an ingredient in a recipe, or they go cheap on a product, or a one part of the construction process, or some material, or you see they go cheap on how they build a friendship, and they only use the friendship, it's only one-sided. So you get to see over the years how, by skipping steps or taking the cheap route or not putting your full intention into something, you don't get the kind of result that you should get. And I hate seeing that, because I hate seeing buildings that are being built and projects that are being built that are half-assed, and they could have done so much better, but they wanted to save a few cents. Or I see how people put together a deal or a friendship or a project or whatever it may be, and they skip steps and they go cheap, and at the end result is just, it's horrible. I'm like, now you got to live with this for the rest of your life. You got a project, you got a building, you got a development, or whatever it may be, and it could have been so much better, but you went cheap, you skipped steps. And if you only put 1% into it, if you only put one more bit of effort into it, it could have been a completely different outcome. But It was not. And I hate seeing that. And I try to educate people against that because I've seen it and I've experienced it so much over my career that I'm really trying to get out there and tell people build better, do a better job, put a little bit of more effort into it, take a little bit more time to do it right, and you're going to have a completely different outcome instead of going the cheap way, the quick way, the easy way.
No, there's an old adage that says, don't half-ass it, whole-ass it, right?
Yeah,
And I
right.
think, in my specific space, in multifamily syndication, there are many a times where we're taking on older buildings and we're just like, why did they build it this way, right? I wish
Right.
that we can do it differently, but in real estate development, you have an opportunity to take, a piece of dirt and turn it around into something great and something attractive that you can not only help the community but also profit on, right? And so I'm
Right.
sure there are many opportunities where in that specific process, I think what is it called, value engineering, right?
Hmm.
You can make sure that your building is optimized, and making sure that all the things are added into your building that would likely add to your bottom line and make it as efficiently as possible. So I think that's great that you have that perspective of building better. So take us back to when you first started in getting into your real estate development business. What was that first deal, and what was the experience from doing your first deal in real estate development?
Yeah. So the first actual development that I actually did was a small piece of land that my dad had from the gas station business, right? We had this little old corner, old gas station that you used to see back in the 60s with the two pumps and the two bays and stuff like that. And it was torn down and had the piece of land for many, many years. And so I said, okay, this is an opportunity where I can go and take this property and put together a good plan, put together a good team, and do a good project on it. So went out, found the architects, went through a couple revisions, realized that the architect who was doing the work on the project wasn't up to snuff. They weren't coming up with a good functional design. So I had to fire that architect and get a new one. And by doing that, it took a little bit more time in the development process, but the new architect came up with a really good design, a really functional design, a design that could be used and could be applied to many different types of tenants and different types of uses at the property. So I'm like, okay, we have a good design now. So now let's see how we can construct it, how we can build it, and who we can build it for. Because something that I like to educate and share with people, I'm like, do not build for yourself. Do not design for yourself. Do not think that this is going to be something that represents you. It's going to represent you in a way that is timeless and lasts forever. So I wanted to build a building that can be used over and over by many different tenants, and it's going to be timeless. So we're able to do that. I designed the building, found the team, was able to get 7-Eleven as a tenant before we even barely got into the construction, and then went through that whole construction process as well, being pretty much the project manager, being the guy who ordered the materials and scheduled the subcontractors and scheduled out the construction aspect and met with the inspectors and did the inspections and from start to finish. So I was able to make sure that that building was built without skipping any steps. I was able to make sure that building was built the right way that would last forever, is designed the right way that looked timeless for a very long time, and actually have a property or development or a building that fit the community, it fit the desired need, and it fit what people needed, versus building something that represented me or what I wanted or my own whims and desires. So was able to go and take that small 6,000 square foot building and do it the right way from the very beginning. And to this day, the building looks great. It's been over 10 years since it was built, and people still think, hey, it's a great looking building. It's well maintained, it's well built, and it will be timeless and be around for a very long time.
That's great. So I'm pretty sure you were pretty excited about having that 7-Eleven,
Yep.
operator, lined up for that development. All right, I know development is one of those business where it's cash intensive, and and it's very hard for some people to break into the development business. But having the tenant lined up for the property, did you feel good about the entire transaction, or how was that feeling, knowing that you had something lined up for the use in that property?
Like I said, it's really important to build for the need of the community, right? So having that tenant lined up was already very helpful, because it just provided a sense of security that once you're completed, you will have that building halfway leased. You already have a tenant who's ready to go and something like that. So that was a really big deal. But at the same time, having them as a tenant has also taught me a lot of things, meaning, I'm not interested in doing retail development because it just doesn't fit for me. And having to deal with 7-Eleven and other tenants, it's not my forte. But it gives me a lot of experience on, hey, I'm building for the community. I'm building for the need for the community. I'm building for the need for the area, which has taught me that whatever I'm going to be doing is for the long term, right? I want to build cool stuff. I want to build timeless stuff. I want to build stuff that everyone drives by and says, that's a cool ass building. That's a nice building. That thing will be around for eternity. So I want my design to be timeless. I want my construction to be timeless. And I want my use of that building to be timeless, because I don't know how many times you've gone down the street, but you've seen a building and it was only built a few years ago, and it looks like hell already, or it looks like it doesn't even belong in that neighborhood, or it looks like it's like, why did they even design it like that? Because it doesn't even fit the neighborhood. And here in Southern California, it's very, sunny, it's, beachy, it's, those types of environments. So I try to build things that lend into the whole environment. So I want Spanish Mediterranean design. I want palm trees. I want red tile roofs. I want lawns and landscaping that will fit that type of a development, because I hate seeing things that just don't belong there. And when they don't belong there, it affects the value. It affects your tenants. It affects your buyers and your sellers, and it really hurts you in the long term by designing something that you want to design for yourself and not for the community.
No, I totally 100% agree. I mean, it's like, what we do in our multifamily business, right? It's, we don't go in and try to put our own taste on on cabinets or tile and stuff like that. We our goal as investors is to satisfy the demand, and what is the demand looking for? What are their needs, right? What's the community needs, right? Do they like granite countertops? Do they like white tiles? So it's about serving the consumer, and that's essentially how we make money, right? So take me through your due diligence process, right? You have this piece of dirt, or you have this land opportunity. What does that due diligence process look like to maybe put the land on the contract, or even through in the feasibility study, right? Of just figuring out, hey, does this opportunity even warrant me moving forward? What does your due diligence process look like?
I think it starts with one thing, and it's knowing what you're good at, right? And knowing where to focus your attention on, right? So if you're looking to be a developer, get into development, or get into investment, you got to be able to sharpen your knife and be able to be very strategic and go after exactly what you are skilled in and what you're familiar with and what you can accomplish. So there's all sorts of kinds of development out there. I can go into hotel development, retail development, office development, but I choose to focus on multifamily development and small scale industrial development, right? 1 to 5 acre industrial type parks and buildings, and multifamily development, 100 units and above. Those are two things that I want to focus on for a few reasons. One, multifamily residential will always be in demand because the population is growing. It's getting more and more expensive and harder to buy a home. So I want to provide that product to a growing population who needs it. And then right now, the small scale industrial. These are good for your small business owners, these small businesses that are getting started, and small owner users who want to buy their own building and operate out of it. Because right now, as the economy is changing towards more and more of a service-based economy, you have more and more delivery service, you have more and more warehousing, you have more and more on-demand type a non-demand type economy where you either need to provide a service such as a delivery or something overnight like an Amazon, or you need to be the guys who are servicing those businesses, whether it's a repair service or parts and materials, or even you're taking your materials or your product and you're putting it in your warehouse and then sending it to Amazon to their warehouse, and then they sell it for you. So there's these two basic parts of the economy that I'm trying to pursue, because I feel like that's where the demand is going to be for the long term. So when I have those two types of specialties that I want to pursue, I look at properties that are on the fringe of society. They're on the outskirts of society. I can't compete with these big major developers that have these deep pockets. I don't have the ability to put millions and millions of dollars into a piece of land or a piece of dirt that's in the middle of downtown, because those are the things that these big developers go after. They got the big investors, the big pockets. I look on the fringe. I look to see, where is the community growing to? What direction? Where is the new freeway off ramps? Where is the new schools being built? Where are the new shopping centers being developed, because there's the demand coming in that direction? I like to go on the fringe and buy things and look for these opportunities where I know that if I buy it now for a fair price, in 2 or 3 years when I'm ready to build it, it's going to become more and more valuable because community and the population is going in that direction, right? So here in Southern California, things are going east. You can't north and south. My focus is on the east side of Los Angeles. So as things progress east of Los Angeles, I'm trying to get onto those fringes and look for those opportunities. I'm looking for things that have good access, right? I don't want things or a development opportunity that you have to make 7 lefts and 3 right turns to get to. I want to make sure it's fairly easy to get to. I want to make sure the utilities are either in the area or coming to that area, because if you got to build a project and you got to run your water and sewer lines a mile down the road to connect to the mains, it's going to be very expensive. So I want utilities to be close by, access to be easy. I want to see growth happening in that area now or in the near future as well. So I look at those things, and I try to stay away from shots at glory, right? Someone says, oh, I got this big piece of land. It's awesome. You can do this, this, and this. And it's really inexpensive. I'm like, yeah, it's really inexpensive for a reason. Nobody wants it.
Mm-hmm.
It's not in the right area. It's too hard to develop. It costs too much to bring services to that area. So I try to look for things that are in the path of growth. And that's a big part of my due diligence. And I don't fight the big developers for all the downtown corners of Main and Main type stuff, because I just don't have that ability. And I don't want to spend my time and spin my wheels competing against all these big guys who can do that a lot better than I can.
No, that's a great investment strategy. So it sounds like, the first thing that you really are focused on is your criteria, right? Because you don't want to be spending a lot of time with screening a whole bunch of different opportunities that really does not fit in your buy box, right? And that's something that's really important for you too, because it allows you to really niche down and become a specialist on the specific product that you are delivering, right? And then the second thing is your attention to the path to progress. And how I look at real estate development or just markets in general, specifically, let's call it submarkets, right? Is I break them down into 3 different phases, right? Your first phase is what I call kind of level 1, where it's like you don't have much investment going on, but there's certainly a lot of opportunity, because you're seeing that the county is putting $250 million into this area, or there's a lot of attention coming into this area. Maybe a big chain is coming into this area, or there's some migration trends, right? So level 1 for me, it is where there's a lot of opportunity because you can get in early, right? And then the level 2 is more so where you're starting to see some shovels being in the ground, not a ton of activity, but there are a lot of stuff that's starting to come online, right? But the
Right.
herd still isn't there, but there's still probably some opportunities there. But
Hmm.
it's certainly not fully stabilized. And then your level 3 is likely your stabilized area where you are trying to avoid, right? There might be
Right.
some opportunities, some infill lots or some opportunities in the immediate core, but for the most part, it's already developed, right? Does that level 1 kind of fit into your buy box of just trying to get in on the earlier side with real estate development
Definitely.
opportunities?
Yeah, for sure. Because, every day we're out in the car, we're all driving, you and me and everyone else, we're all going somewhere. But are you paying attention to what's actually going on? Are you paying attention, like, hey, why is the city tearing up the street and putting in all of this new pipeline? Why is the community planning or public works department ripping up the sidewalk and making the street 3 lanes now instead of one, right? What's the reason behind that? People don't pay attention to that. I try to, because the city, the large developers, and all these larger entities, they have the homework, they have the research, they have the data, and it tells them they need to do this because traffic is getting bad. There's more and more cars on this road. There's more and more developments coming up. They're going to demand larger sewer, power, water, gas lines, and we have to put those in now. So they know what's coming. They see it on the horizon. So they're putting in the infrastructure. So what I like to do is I like to make sure I pay attention to that infrastructure. I like to see, hey, why is all this happening? Are they just tearing this up because it's old, or are they tearing it up and making it better because they're improving the infrastructure for the future? So it's something I definitely pay attention to. And another thing is to watch the big heavy lifters, right? See what they're doing. If you take, for an example, Elon Musk had Tesla up here in Northern California, right? And he said, I'm going to build a new plant, et cetera, et cetera. And the state of California made it hard for him, right? They wanted to tax him and they wanted to do this and do this. And he's like, I'm putting all these millions and billions of dollars into the economy. I'm creating jobs through construction and jobs through manufacturing, and I'm creating a small economy here. How can we work together? And the state of California was very, very hard and took a hard line and didn't help him. So Elon Musk said, okay, I'm packing up shop. I'm shutting everything down. I'm going to Texas. I'm going to Austin. Now, if you go down and look at Austin, where he showed up, was able to put things together real fast. The community and the state and the city were very helpful in helping him put together his, move his headquarters, build his new plants. If you take a look, you can see what's going on outside of that economy now. There's more residential that is in demand because they have all these new employees that are coming to the area. So you need to supply those people with housing. Well, the people that are moving there need housing, but at the same time, they need food. So you have new shopping that's coming up. And then they need gas. You have new gas stations. And then you have people who supply the parts to Tesla. So you need more warehouses and smaller facilities so these businesses can supply Tesla with the products they need. So if you watch these big heavy movers that are moving to different areas, it will increase the demand for infrastructure, the demand for other types of development, and the other products that are needed. Same thing that's happening to Florida. There is a very large investment firm moving out of Chicago. Billion and billions of dollars of business are moving to Florida. I guarantee you, wherever they end up and they buy an office building or they build their own office building, it's going to create a demand for that area. So if you can find out where things are happening now, you can go in and you can find opportunities to buy some land or to buy a development or to get into something before it gets too expensive and you get priced out. So follow the big guys, follow the cities, and follow the trends that you see happening, because if you're able to do that and have a scientific approach to where things are going to be happening, you can get in early and buy some of that dirt and buy some of that land and have the opportunity for a really successful development.
Being successful in real estate today is like legal insider trading, as long as you're able to follow the trends, know who's going where, and knowing how certain moves, whether it's micro or macro, can impact the demand factors in a specific market. I mean, it's no telling. I mean, we've been successful on on a much smaller scale than real estate the types of projects that you build, but just being able to get in early and pay attention to the basic fundamentals, whether it's jobs, housing, the demand factors that are just fundamental to real estate. I mean, you can literally create a fortune by getting into these markets early. So, I want to go back to, staying on the topic of actually your first deal, right? You mentioned firing an architect and then finding someone else that was new to help you develop this great building, right? And the hardest part, I like to say, in real estate is contractors or just developing your team, because it's really tough to really find that one great contractor or that one great architect sometimes, just because you just never know who you're dealing with until you've actually gone through the process or different projects, right? You have to kind of feel some of these subcontractors out sometimes. So talk about building a team in real estate development. How important is it for you to build a team, especially in today's environment, to be successful in real estate development today?
So it's really important that you have those guys, in your phone that you can go to, and they provide a consistent, solid, good product to you every time. Whether it's architecture, engineering, construction, materials, whatever it may be, they're consistent. And another thing I don't like to do is I don't want to recreate the wheel every time I do a project, right? So I will go to City Hall and pull plans from somebody else's project that was a great design or a great property. I was like, okay, who did that? Because that was a great job, and I want to go and recreate it with the same kind of architects and the same kind of team that run it. So I'll pull the permits to see who the contractor was. I'll pull the plans and see who that architect was, right? Because that stuff is public knowledge. All that stuff at City Hall is public knowledge. So if you want to know what's going on, you can go to City Hall, go to the planning department, go to the building department, and ask to see those documents. And they'll tell you who is the architect, who is the engineer, who is the contractor, and things like that. So I like to figure out who did those projects and to put them in my Rolodex, right? I want to put them on my speed dial because I know they're doing a good job. So when we go back to when I fired that architect, I was already money in deep, spent money. I was in deep with them already, but I figured out that sometimes you have to cut your losses, right? Yeah, I don't want to, if you go and try and ride it to the end, you're going to have a bad product. You're going to have a bad design. You're going to have a bad building for the rest of your life. I'd rather cut that relationship off and get started with someone else who will probably do a much better job, who'll be more consistent and will be there for you at the end with a better design and a better building. So sometimes you have to learn to cut your losses and leave some money on the floor, on the table, wherever it is, because you already spent it, and say, hey, you know what, that's a learning experience. I'll never do it again. It did cost me some money, but I know now if I start from scratch or if I start with someone else and I continue and I finish it out with someone better, I know it's going to be better for me in the long run, and it's going to be better for me for the next project. So don't beat yourself up if you've made a bad decision. We try to avoid that and minimize it to the best we can, but sometimes it happens. But at the same time, use that as a learning experience to say, okay, I'll never use that service provider again. I found this much better person, and I know from here on out, I'm covered. I know they're going to give me everything that I pay them for and more. And like I said, don't reinvent the wheel. If you see something good, go out and find out who did it. Talk to them, hire them. Don't think that you got to start from scratch. Find out what other people are doing well. Find out who's doing it, hire them, and then you can do it better.
No, that's the same approach that I take into my business as well, right? On one end, it's the hire slow, fire fast, approach, right? Sometimes you have to give people a chance to get your project started or get started in the business. But the minute that you feel something in your gut that tells you, hey, this person and I probably are not going to work together, you need to find a way to fire them as quickly as possible, right?
Sure.
And I've certainly made a ton of mistakes in real estate, but the mistakes have always created the lessons that I try not to make twice, right? Because we live in a world where, or we live in a business where mistakes are going to happen. It's part of, we've been doing mistakes since we were born, right? We've
Yeah.
been taking the wrong steps. We've been trying to crawl, and then we got to walking, and walking to running. So like failure and mistakes are part of the process. But how can you learn from your mistakes? How can you figure out your mistakes quicker than the next person, and become successful by just turning that mistake
Yeah.
into something positive, right? That's extremely important. So let's talk about the real estate development construct today in terms of building in today's environment. What struggles are you having? Is it the supply chain issues by chance? Are you having, are you struggling with, getting your deals to pencil at the right price? Or, are interest rates affecting you in today's current market? What types of struggles are you having, if any, in today's environment? So someone who's, trying to get started in real estate development, or trying to take their real estate development business to the next level, can learn from.
I think, if you are pursuing an opportunity that just makes sense and it checks off all the boxes, you'll be okay. I'm not going out in some area or building some sort of product that is kind of like on the edge, like, hey, if it works, it's going to be a home run. If it doesn't, it's going to be a disaster. It's more like your bread and butter, right? So let's stick with what is needed, like I spoke about before. What is needed for the community, right? What is going to be needed regardless of what's going on in the economy? People will always need to eat, they'll always need to sleep somewhere, and they'll always need to work somewhere, right? So what are those basic things that the people need, and provide it to them? So I had this conversation earlier today with a friend of mine who is a plumbing supplier, right? They supply large project and development with all their plumbing needs, whether it's their pipes, the sewers, the undergrounds, the fixtures, the fittings, and all that kind of stuff, right? And right now, with the change of the economy happening in the last 30 and 60, 90 days, they are now full of material versus how they were a year ago where they had no material. They are now full of material, and they're all waiting to see how the economy is going to change in the immediate future. So same thing with me. How is it going to change? Are the interest rates going to continue to go up? If the interest rates go up, does that mean construction is going to slow down? If construction slows down, does that mean my construction cost goes down, right? Or if construction wants to stay steady, are the guys who have all the material going to start dropping their prices to see how they can keep their business going? Because if they keep their prices high but construction goes down, they're going to suffer. So they got to lower their prices so construction stays high, because if my prices on material comes down, I can continue to do my projects and things to that extent. So right now, I think everyone is just pumping the brakes and waiting to see where things happen in the next 30, 60, 90 days. I don't see anybody stopping development. I don't see anybody canceling development plans, but I do see people pumping the brakes and saying, okay, we're not going to stop, but I just want to coast here for a little bit to see where things end up. Where does that material price end up? Where does the labor price end up? And where does the consumer and the interest rates end up? Because all of that plays into whether I go out and I build 100-unit apartment complex, or I go out and I build 3, 4, 5 industrial buildings. Let's see where that ends up in the next 30, 60, 90 days before we take the next step forward and continue on with our projects.
No, it's something where for us, in the stabilized multifamily space that we're dealing with on a daily basis, right? It's being able to project forward construction costs in today's environment, while managing debt. As we if we're taking out, we have a couple of construction loans right now, in our syndications that we're constantly kind of managing the difference between, hey, we have a floating rate that every time we draw on this project, it's increasing. And then, the Fed just came out, a couple of days ago, as we talk in July 2022, that they're, yesterday actually, that they're raising rates 75 basis points, right? So it's that constant, complex of, hey, can we move forward with our plan, or do we just sit still because these rates are getting higher and higher? You know,
I think that affects a lot of people who have for sale product. You're selling a house, the interest rates go up. That means your construction loan goes up, but it also means the ability of your buyer decreases, right? So if you're building single family homes, yeah, I think that plays into it a lot. Right now, the only for sale product I have are my small industrial buildings. Well, I do know that industrial is still in demand, and small changes in the interest rate will affect things, but probably not as much as the single family home market, right? But if the interest rates continue to go up, that means more people are going to will be unable to buy, and they'll have to rent, right? So we go into the multifamily where that stays consistent. So the changes in the interest rates will affect certain parts of real estate investment and development much more than other areas. And those are the ones that I try to avoid, where that interest rate and the market changes are really critical to my business. I try to avoid those areas.
Yeah, yeah, and the way that I look at demand factors, I mean, we've been underbuilding. On your point of just the for sale housing, we've been underbuilding for, was it over 10 plus years since the last recession, right? And there's
Yep.
such a backlog on just supply coming into the market, because we just haven't been keeping up with demand. And
Yeah.
one of the things that I'm watching as we continue to see where the market ends up is, how is that going to affect people buying homes, right? We have institutional capital that's scaled up more on their appetite for single family homes, and while I don't think that we're anywhere near some sort of softening, huge softening period, like there's going to be some sort of crash, we're nowhere near that. I do think that the demand for single family homes is still going to be robust, but even for rentals, multifamily owners, I mean, the fundamentals are very attractive for the long term, at least. So I think there's a huge opportunity for operators to capitalize and bring that product to the market that I think a lot of people would be interested in, just because they can't afford it. It's just out of control right now.
It's like you said, it's those solid fundamentals that will always be needed, right? Like the multifamily product and some of the commercial product will always be needed. Some of those other markets are a lot more affected by changes in the economy. So if you're in the hotel development or the hotel investment business, or if you're in the single family business, or you're in anything that is the first to go, right? So when the change in the economy happens, what do people cut out first? They cut out maybe leisure, they cut out the extras, cut out stuff like that. So you saw recently when COVID happened, people stopped going to hotels, they stopped going to the malls, they stopped doing this and doing this because they weren't allowed to, right? But if a change in the economy happens, they're going to stop spending money. They're going to stop going on vacation. They're going to stop doing all these leisure activities. So I try and stay away from those type of markets or those types of investments and developments that have a much more, they're affected much more by the economy than everything else is, right? Maybe that hotel, that shopping center, or that resort property has huge amounts of opportunity to make money, but it's also a lot more affected by the economy. So I rather stay away from that than take the chance on some of those things.
Yeah, totally, 100% agree. And I think about that, whenever I'm looking at markets, that's one of my core, fundamentals in terms of the numbers, or the demand factors that I look for, right? Think about something like Orlando, right, where there's a heavy reliance on tourism that boosts that economy. When COVID happened, that economy had a huge pullback, right? Prior to COVID, Orlando was just so robust, and everyone was just pumping a lot of dollars, and things were going very well in the multifamily space over there as well. So definitely looking at that from a macro level, and putting that into your analysis on whether you're trying to invest into that market, but also that product, because it can have a direct impact on you being able to be successful in being in defense mode whenever things get a little shaky, in the environment. So let me ask you this. You have ton of experience in real estate development, real estate in general. If you had to start this marathon all over again, what would you do differently?
Good question. Good question. I would figure out how to create the relationships and get the knowledge in construction, right? Because the more you know about construction and the more you understand construction, the better you're able to manage your development project, right? Because construction and construction labor are a majority of that expense. So the more you're able to understand it and the better you're able to manage that process, the better development you're going to have, the less expensive development you're going to have, and the more opportunities you're going to have to save some money here and there, right? So getting that construction experience, whether you're working for a construction company or a contractor or developer, understanding that construction side of the business. And at the same time, being able to understand market trends, understand and have the ability to really understand where things are going, like what economies are growing, what cities are growing, why are they growing, how people are moving there, why do they move there. If you take a look at the Sun Belt, because people have been talking about the Sun Belt for the last 50 years, why is that? It's because the people go to that area because the environment is easier, the temperatures are different, you don't get ice, you don't get snowed in, you don't have that. So
Taxes.
Yeah, taxes as well. So understanding those trends and why people do things is very important, right? So if I was to get started all over again, I would go into small developments, fourplexes, eightplexes, stuff like that, something that are not too expensive. You can get into them fairly easily, and those opportunities exist everywhere. So definitely get into something like that. I wouldn't start out with any of the commercial stuff that I've done in the past. It was a great experience, but it did not produce the same kind of financial results that I would like, or that I get from other types of development. And it's very management intensive. So, commercial projects I would stay away from. I'd definitely focus on any sort of residential, single family, multifamily, and any sort of industrial warehousing that provides a service to others that will always be in need.
No, that's great. And what I got from that was, one, find a way to get the intrinsic knowledge on construction, right? Because that's basically 90% of your development, right? It's just construction and putting things all together, right? And then the second thing is just get started, whether it's, buying a lot, or finding some sort of deal where you can get your hands ready and your feet wet, right? Get get things moving. So I think that's something that not a lot of people really pay attention to, in terms of just finding a way to get started, because you can get the shiny object syndrome of, I need to go big, I need to do a big development, my first deal. But there's value in just experience. There's value in just being able to say, hey, I did that before, and I'm working on scaling up and doing it at a bigger scale. So I think that's 100% important.
I had a conversation recently. I went out to lunch with a friend of mine. My friend is a partner in a construction company that is building somewhere between $200 to $500 million a year in projects for people, right? It's a very big construction company, been around, and he's a partner, right? And I asked him, hey, when you hire contractors for your jobs, I understand they're much more expensive. He's like, yes, because they're able to provide a bigger service. Like if I need a driveway for a project, that driveway is going to be, 5,000 feet long and 300 feet wide, because it's such a big development. But when I hired a guy to do my driveway at my house, it was much cheaper, because it was a smaller crew, smaller amount of materials. And that big driveway cost him XYZ dollars per square foot to do, but on his house it was like 1/3 the cost, right? Because the amount of labor, the materials, and the amount of people who can do it. So if you could really understand what it takes and how much it costs to do something on a project, it's really going to save you a lot of money. Because if somebody comes and says, okay, I'm going to pour you a slab of concrete and it's going to cost you $25,000. Well, if you're able to understand how much concrete costs, if you're able to understand how many guys are needed to do the job and understand what it takes to do the job, you're able to figure out that guy is really not giving you a good price, or he really is giving you a good price. And if you want to know the price of concrete, call a concrete company. Hey, how much is a load of concrete? $1,200, $1,300, whatever it may be. Well, how much is that? Oh, it's 10 yards. Well, how big is 10 yards? Okay, now you understand how much concrete one of those trucks can provide and how much it costs you, right? If you want to understand how much lumber it's going to take to do a room addition, go out and look at the plans and count how many pieces of lumber, then go to Home Depot and find out how many pieces of wood it costs, right? Once you're able to understand that aspects of construction, like breaking it down, then you can really find ways to save money and do a better job, and at the end it's going to be better for you. So just break it down. Whatever you do, break it down.
That is the best advice for getting into construction or just learning construction at the ground level, right? And that's something that I took into my own business from just going to Home Depot and finding out, what are these materials costing? Yeah. When I was, back 4 years ago trying to get into real estate, I had no idea, what it costs to hang drywall, right? But if you're able to, segregate your business down to a granular level, that can really put you or propel you in front of a lot of different, other operators, or even when you're trying to win a bid on a property, right? Being able to get down to the nitty gritty can certainly propel you to the next level in this real estate space, which it seems like, you've taken all of that knowledge from your brokerage and construction background and implemented that into your business to be the successful developer that you are today. So that is great advice for someone who is trying to get into commercial real estate, learn construction, and just, get started, right? Or take their business to the next level. So if anyone wants to know anything about, what you're doing and follow you and just learn more about, Ahmed, right? How can our listeners follow you moving forward?
Yeah, mostly on Instagram. I'm very, very active on Instagram. I try and put as much good content as I can, and it's Ahmed Builds Better on Instagram, and that's the best way to get a hold of me or to follow me or to learn from me is that. And I share tips and tricks and best practices along the way as well. So if you want to pick up some of the stuff that I've learned over the past throughout my career, or what I'm doing currently and how I'm doing it better, just go ahead and follow me on Instagram.
Absolutely. And Ahmed is a great follow because he has a wealth of knowledge, and I've just been following him since our Clubhouse days. Although I haven't seen him on Clubhouse recently, he seems like he seems to be pretty busy. But Ahmed, I had such a great time chatting with you today. Thank you for being on the show. Thank you for all our listeners today for tuning in to the Mogul Marathon Real Estate Podcast. And again, Ahmed, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you. Appreciate you.